Cohen. I think most of you know me. I'm a co-chair for our Human and Community Development Committee, even though I don't think we have I don't have a counterpart, but I still will take the co-chair position. I want to just get started, and I recognize some people, but not everyone here. So I guess if you want to, there's some new people coming in. If you want to introduce yourself, so maybe I can call on you and just unmute, and you can introduce yourself. So I'll start with the people that I do know. Jackie Grimshaw, I see you. Sarah, if you want to just say hello and just introduce yourself. I hope this isn't going to be hard. You are unmuted, but we can't hear you. Oh, now there you go. And we're starting off good. Unfortunately, I can't hear you. Can anyone else hear Jackie? Okay. Well, Jackie, no. Oh, Jackie, nice to have you. maybe that will work better. Okay, let's start moving along here. Where we are, I saw another. Where were we? Another Jackie Forbes. There you are.
Hi, good morning, everyone. Jackie Forbes. I'm Chief of Planning and Programming at Kane County Division of Transportation.
Great. Thank you so much for coming along. Tiffany McDowell, if you want to just say hello.
Hi, everyone. This is Tiffany McDowell. I am representing Chicagoland Equity Network and YWCA Evanston North Shore. I'm the director of the Equity Institute.
Great. Thank you. I know we have a lot of CMAP people on, but we will come to you. Alicia Burton, if you can unmute yourself and introduce yourself.
Good morning. My name is Elisa Bunton. I am the Director of Community Affairs at Illinois Institute of Technology, and I have been attending these meetings for over a year now.
Okay. And unfortunately, it didn't look like your name came up. I'll just sort of in the notes to me and Enrique. So sorry, and sorry for getting your name wrong, your last name wrong. See who else we got here. This is a little hard to do. Stephanie Levin.
Morning, Stephanie Levine from CMAP.
Okay, great. I can tell some of the people from CMAP because you have that in your little header. So I'm not sure of all of this. Matthew Stern, are you from?
Good morning, Matt Stern, CMAP.
CMAP. Okay, so we got a list CMAP. I might as well just go through all of you guys. Lily Nepple.
Yeah, Lily Nepple, Assistant Planner, CMAP.
Okay, great. Courtney Barnes, I think you're from CMAP also.
Hi, yes, Courtney Barnes from CMAP.
Okay, and Katie from CMAP also. Hello.
Good morning, Katie Petruska from CMAP.
Great. And Julius Christian. Okay. Jason Navota, we know you're from CMAP.
Yes, good morning, Jason Navota. Good to see everybody.
Nice to see everyone. And Quinn Castle, CMAP.
Hi, everyone. Quinn Castle, planning intern at CMAP.
Great. Nice to meet you. Nice to, I see you've got a bunch of some interns. That's great. Learning all the work that you do. Jenna Gonzalez.
Hi, I'm Jenna Gonzalez, an intern at CMAP.
Another intern, great. Are you, the interns, are you from a university around here or?
I go to DePaul.
Okay, great.
I'm at USC.
Okay, great. Well, great to have you. You have great experience with CMAP. I hope you have one. Ryan Tomto, I really should not be in this position. I'm not doing good then.
Hi, I'm Ryan Tomto. I'm a new senior policy analyst here at CMAP.
Great. Well, welcome. Nice to meet you. Let's see if anyone I didn't get. I see a couple of other CMAP people. Tom Murtha.
Tom Murtha. I'm a transportation planner.
Okay. Great. And Beatrix Jan.
I'm Matrix Ann. I'm an intern at CMAP studying at the University of Michigan.
Okay, great. Welcome. And then Timmy and Enrique are fearless leaders. Is that a
Hi,
clapping?
Timmy, liaison to HCD, CMAP.
Great. And Enrique?
Hey everyone, Enrique Castillo, and also a liaison to the committee.
Great. Michelle?
Hi, good morning, everyone. My name is Michelle Galoy. I am an engagement associate at CMAP.
Great. And Tina Bassett-Smith?
Good morning, Tina Bassett-Smith. I'll be presenting a little bit later and tell you more about my role, but I'm also at CMAP.
Great. And Lindsay?
Good morning, Lindsay Bailey. I am also a senior planner at CMAP and I will be presenting today.
Great. And Jane? We're almost done here.
Thanks, Sherry. Jane Grover, Director of Public Engagement for the agency, and with Michelle, I'm helping to produce this meeting. Good morning.
Great. Thank you. And Daniel?
Morning. I'm at CMAP. I'm a new associate policy analyst.
Great. Nice to meet you. And Simone?
Morning, Simone Weil. I'm a principal on the policy team.
Okay. I think we have everyone. If you didn't introduce yourself, you can unmute. So I'm glad we're gonna get started, and hopefully everybody has access to the.
Yeah, hello. This is Greg Pullman. I'm on the telephone.
Oh, okay, great. Hi, Greg. How are you doing?
Hi, how are you doing? Quite well. I don't know if there's others on the phone.
Okay.
Yeah, Enrique Salgado, Centene.
Hi, Enrique. How are you?
I'm good, and you?
Nice to hear. Oh. Okay, so I think that's everybody on the phone. Enrique and Glenn, Greg. Okay, and hopefully, again, like I said, everybody has access to the agenda that was sent out. So first, I guess I already called it to order, agenda changes and announcements. Were there any, Timmy, Enrique, any other agenda changes that you know
of? Yes, so thanks everyone for joining us today. Just to run through some announcements, this meeting is being recorded and will be posted online. Please let us know if you're having an issue with muting or unmuting yourself via the chat, and a CMAP staff member can help you. Please use the chat for any questions committee members might have, or to state if you would like to make a public comment. And committee members, please, when making a motion, we ask you to include your name. In terms of agenda changes, item 4.0, selected committee member updates, will be pushed to after agenda item 7.0, the grade crossings project update. So that's all for the updates that we have, and we can move on to roll call and the minutes, Sherry.
Okay, for roll call, I'm not 100% sure what you wanted there.
So given the recent Open Meetings Act stipulations, the CMAP working committees, we're having the chairs go through the roster of members at the end of the agenda, and so we'll have each member state their name walking through that roll call as to whether they're present or not, and then we'll have you, Sherry, ask whether they accept the minutes as prepared for both the February and June meeting, since we also need to prepare the minutes, or have the minutes approved, I should say, for February. So that's the plan that CMAP is utilizing going forward, because we now need to have each committee member say yes or no as to whether they approve the minutes.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, okay. So I will read from the list down here on the thing. And Alicia, I see that you're unfortunately not listed, but I will start with you because you start with the B. So if you can state that you are here, obviously we know that. And if you approve of the February and June meeting minutes.
Good morning, Elisa Bunton. I do approve of both sets of meeting minutes.
Great. So next, you make me go with people's names. Fluturi. I didn't see Fluturi on the meeting here. Okay. Oops, let me go back to that. Lori Dittman. Jackie Forbes.
Jackie Forbes here, and I approve the meeting minutes for the 2 months.
Joan Fox. Kendra Freeman. Melody Geraci. Jackie Grimshaw. Okay.
Becky is giving a thumbs up.
Okay.
Given audio issues.
Hannah Kite. Tiffany McDowell.
Tiffany McDowell, and I approve.
Okay. Greg Pullman.
Here, I approve both sets of minutes.
Thank you. Obai Reed. Enrique Salgado.
I approve.
Raj Shah. Rosalie Schemmer. Darnell Shields. Jana Simon. Dominic Tochi. William Towns. So, is that okay? Because we don't have, I don't know how that works. We have a right amount of people on that.
We do. We've determined that 25% of membership constitutes a quorum for approval of the minutes and working committees. So thank you.
Okay, great. And then Timmy, I'm sorry, I did not write down. What were you saying? You were moving item 4 after another item, or?
So yes, we were moving the selected member updates to after item 7.0, the grade crossings project. We would also on the minutes, we would having there be a motion, given the roll call, a motion to accept the minutes would also be appropriate at this time.
Okay, so I will make a motion to, or will someone make a motion to approve the 2 sets of minutes?
Enrique Salgado motions to approve.
Any second?
I second.
Thank you. And all in favor, unmute and say aye.
Aye.
Or thumbs up. Okay.
Aye.
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 I think that's good. Does that work for us? Okay. All right, we'll catch up with that. Okay, great. Thank you very much. So we will go into the CMAP updates on your agency-wide internal equity initiatives. So I'm very excited to hear all the work that you've been doing.
Good morning, everybody. My name is Tina Fassett-Smith, and some of you may recall that I briefly introduced myself at our February meeting in my new role, and so I'll talk a little bit more about that during my presentation. But this morning, I wanted to talk to you about our internal work on diversity, equity, and inclusion at CMAP. So you can go to the next slide, Michelle. Thank you. So I'm going to talk about my role, the recent timeline that got us here, our core values that we've adopted as an agency and how they're guiding us in this work, and the commitment and goals that we've made recently. So I'm the Director of Innovation and Strategic Alignment. I've been in this role for 8 months. It's a role that Erin Aleman created when she came to the agency, so it's new to the agency. I have several responsibilities, but one of the core responsibilities in this role is to guide agency development of a comprehensive program to support and advance inclusion and equity, as well as the external facing focus on inclusive growth. So this role includes training programs, policies, practices, and communications to implement our core value of pursue equity. You can go to the next slide, Michelle. So I want to talk about our timeline, how we got here, but just because this timeline begins in 2016, I want to emphasize that obviously our work to create a more inclusive culture has been ongoing since the start of our agency. Many employees here, past and present, and much of our leadership has been committed to developing a more inclusive culture. However, in 2016, our staff founded CMAP's Internal Diversity and Inclusion Working Group. I want to take a moment to just acknowledge, because she meant so much to this committee, and I know the members here all knew her well, the contribution of Asil Tina, the former liaison to HCD. She was a co-chair along with Enrique and Jane of the DIWG, and I've personally benefited so much from the work that she left behind when she left the agency in her role there. In 2018, the DIWG adopted a formal charter, and in 2019, and I'll talk about this a little bit more in the next couple slides, as an agency, we went through a months-long process of adoption of core values, and out of that came the creation of the Director of Innovation and Strategic Alignment role, my role, and that sits within the executive office. And so this is the first time we've had a paid position within the executive office or any department at CMAP whose sole focus, one of their focuses, was our internal equity progress. And so this year, what I'm working on is an internal DEI work plan that covers 2 years, has dedicated time, staff, timing, and budget. We've also recently, as of actually a couple days ago, become members in the Government Alliance on Race and Equity. That's something I'll also talk a little bit more about in my presentation, but it's going to be really central to both our internal and external equity work. You also may have seen that after the murder of George Floyd and the uprisings that followed, our board put out a statement on racial equity. We plan to build on that when the board reconvenes in September, and there'll be more to come after that. This committee can definitely expect regular updates on not just this internal work, but the external work. So really just giving a snapshot of what we've accomplished recently. We'll go ahead to the next slide. So in a few months ago, we began staff engagement over the vision for the agency and determination of core values that we really wanted to guide decision making. I'm going to walk through those core values really quickly, but I really want to focus on the last two that are informing the work that I'm doing right now. So we have 5. Serve with passion. We're passionate about serving the people of metropolitan Chicago. We build public trust by being good stewards of public resources and proactively sharing information. Go to the next slide. We lead with excellence. We lead on issues that advance the region. We believe the power of data and the story it tells. We identify and share solutions and inspire others to adapt them for their communities. We drive innovation. We're driven by the Sorry, not sure if that's me or if that's others. There, that went away. Please let me know if anybody has any audio problems as I'm talking. We are driven by the desire to find more efficient methods to achieve the most impact. We do this by seeking new solutions to old problems, taking calculated risks, and daring to try them. We foster collaboration. We believe inclusion and collaboration strengthens our work. We seek out voices of those who often go unheard or face barriers to public participation. And finally, we pursue equity. We are guided by the principle that everyone has a right to opportunity and a high quality of life. We work to realize equity for all. So the reason I want to talk about these is they, when we developed them as an agency, we voted on them, we engaged staff in them quite extensively, and we realized that they were aspirational, not descriptions of what we were doing, but aspirations of where we wanted to go. And they have guided us in making commitments and setting goals around our internal DEI work. One of them is continual and mandatory trainings, prioritizing inclusive culture, the professional growth for all of our staff, and the development of management skills to build a more anti-racist and inclusive workplace. And so we committed to holding workshops or trainings facilitated by experts every quarter, which is quite aggressive. And so right now I have about 25 hours of training scheduled over the next 2 years, or at least potentially scheduled. And we're also focusing on training for our management staff that's more in depth in the training we're requiring all staff to do. So this began in May. It was supposed to begin in March, actually the week that we all went to work remotely, so it was delayed a little bit. And then I had to work with facilitators to make sure that that remote training could happen as they switched to how we all have switched to doing everything via Zoom. And the first training we began with was really foundational about cross-communication skills for the workplace. But then we built off that with a training that was mandatory for our managers and our senior leaders on disrupting anti-Blackness, so standing with in solidarity with our Black coworkers and developing an anti-racist workplace. So we've committed to bringing in a variety of different trainers, evaluating those trainers, and then developing a permanent curriculum that we would give to staff as they go through our promotion sequence and become managers, and that we would also have mandatory for onboarding as we trained new staff members. Part of the DEI work plan that I'm developing also requires a review of internal practices to operationalize an equity focus in our recruitment, hiring, evaluations, pay, and promotions. We just hired a new director for our HR department, and together we're partnering to figure out what that's going to look like and make sure that we have the time and the staff to devote to it, as well as deadlines and measures of success that we want to meet. And another part of this work plan is developing engagement with local and national government organizations leading on equity. So in the past couple of months, I, along with, from staff suggestions, along with the DIWG work plan that had already been developed by that group before I took this role, evaluated a couple of different national organizations that are leading in this work and ones that we could join and take advantage of. From that process, we elected to join the Government Alliance on Race and Equity. One of the things that this is really exciting about this is that they will enable us to connect with other MPOs and government leaders working on this, and to take advantage of technical assistance that they provide on both internal and external capacity building for DEI work. You can go ahead to the next slide. So I just really want to quickly touch on external facing work that we're doing in this. This committee is well aware of the development of inclusive growth as a 2050 principle, and you can expect regular updates on this going forward, but let's go to the next slide, Michelle. Thanks. As part of the visioning process we did where we developed the core values that I just spoke about, we identified 3 focus areas: transportation, climate, regional economic competitiveness, that we really want to zero in on for implementation of 2050 in the next 3 to 5 years. And we're currently engaged in multi-year planning with a renewed focus on equity and implementation of the inclusive growth principle for all 3 of these areas. You all are well aware that we have staff who has expertise in these areas that are leading this work, and you can expect updates from them. But in addition, we've really, this renewed focus has informed recent hiring that we've done and more capacity building that we want to do to make sure that we're not just building the internal skills, but that this is reflected in our external work and that we're measuring progress on it. But for our discussion today, one of the things that I would be really interested in if anyone wanted to share was what internal DEI initiatives are working well right now in your organizations or that have worked well in the past. One of the things also that I would really appreciate is if any of you are in organizations where you have staff working specifically on internal DEI initiatives. I have really benefited from building my network of other professionals doing this work. And so my name and a phone number and email are going to be on the next slide. I would certainly appreciate any personal connections you would be able to make to me so I can continue to grow that network and learn from others. But if anyone wanted to share anything about internal DEI initiatives you're currently undergoing, or ones that have worked well or ones that haven't, we'd certainly be interested in hearing about that or any other questions you have about what I presented. Thank you.
Thank you, Gina. That's great to hear the plan and the progress that you're making. Is anyone able to share what's happening in their organizations or some resources? It's hard to tell in this setting. I will just speak, of course, now and then please also join in. So, you know, with when the Mayor Lightfoot came in, she established a office of equity and social justice. I think that's what, and hired the first ever person to oversee that, and been working very closely with them. CDPH is hiring a chief racial equity officer, hopefully within the next month, to really take a look at internal work that we do. We do have several committees that look at dismantling racism and multiculturalism and cultural leadership within our work. So we are, you know, it'd be great to connect. We're also members of GARE too. So when the chief racial equity officer starts to be able to do that. It's also really a main component of our soon-to-be released Healthy Chicago 2020 plan. So everyone else is doing as we all work together to move towards this. Did anyone else want to share what's going on in their organization? Just unmute yourself.
This is Greg Pullman. Not anything with our organization, but I was wondering, are you incorporating in your training issues and stigma behind, you know, people with disabilities? I mean, no matter what race or breed or whatever they are, but are you incorporating in the training equity as related to people with disability?
So what I've developed so far is a training curriculum that goes over 2 years that does touch on equity for disabilities and training on how to develop a more inclusive culture here at CMAP for that. In addition, I've talked to trainers about developing a more affirming workplace for LGBTQ+ and other, you know, stigmatized identities. So I think that one of the things that I've discovered in talking to different trainers and facilitators is that this is a process along the spectrum with a lot of time that has to be devoted to a lot of different topics. So, but yes, that is an important key part of the curriculum that we've developed.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to have any conversations about this on here.
Wonderful.
Hi, this is Tiffany. A couple things that I just created this year that on.
Somebody's making a lot about external noise. Okay, sorry about that.
No problem. Yeah, I think everyone looks muted now. So as many of you know, at YWCA Evanston North Shore, we actually provide a lot of training and workshop opportunities. So happy to support folks and just to continue to grow the field of practitioners that are doing this work. We provide workshops which can be found on our website, and they're open to the public. We also support organizations that are looking to do their own, create their own racial equity strategies. And that's something we've been working on for about the past 8 to 9 years, but really have grown this work over the past 2 years. And something that I'll mention is that we're specifically partnering with folks at this table in a couple different ways. So we've come in as a partner with the Transportation Equity Network that CNT is leading, and I'll just jump in because I know Jackie is having a couple audio challenges, but several partners have been working over, it's been about the past year, I think, Jackie, to really look at the ways to integrate an explicit racial equity focus into transportation, and then look at ways to connect community-led strategies to planning decisions that are related to transportation, as well as other things. And as many of you know me that sit in the public health space, I think it's really important that we have multidisciplinary tables set so that we're helping to broaden that out. So as much as we can, folks from CMAP have been engaged in that as well. And I should also say we're supporting CDOT's upcoming strategy for their strategic plan and helping to embed equity into that. So that's exciting. And then the last thing I'll just throw out, so I don't take up too much time, is that we're also working with Metropolitan Planning Council we originally had framed this as building a learning cohort for people who impact or work in the built environment space, whether they're urban planners or community members that intersect with Elevated Chicago. I'm sorry, it's a partnership between MPC and Elevated Chicago. And so over the past few months, since we've been working remotely, we launched a workshop series. So some of you have been participating in that and really challenging ourselves to integrate justice and equity into diversity inclusion strategies for urban planners. So I believe we had the last one last week, and we've gotten great feedback. So we're looking to continue to host those types of spaces. So as we continue, I'll make sure that folks are on the list to get that information as we continue to move that forward. And I think that may be it. I think I said a lot, but feel free to reach out and I definitely would love to connect to you talk broadly about the work you're doing, and if there's any way that makes sense.
Thank you so much, Tiffany. That's exactly the kind of resources I was hoping people would share. I have taken advantage of trainings both at the YMCA Evanston and was part of I think it was last week, the workshop with MPC Elevated, and both have been really important resources for me. So thank you for sharing.
That sounds great. I don't know if there was anything else or whether we want to move to the next agenda item. Again, feel free if you'd like to share along the way as we go along, which actually moves us right into Elevated Chicago, about the Garfield Green Line and the LTA project that we're working with. Who is able to present on that?
That would be me. I'm going to get started and share my screen with you. So first, I just want to say thank you for having me here today to talk about the Garfield Green Line Station Action Plan. And this is an equitable transit-oriented development plan that was initiated by Elevated Chicago. Elevated Chicago is a collaboration of 17 public, private, and nonprofit organizations and entities, including CMAP, that have come together to incorporate equity into transit-oriented development in Chicago by improving health, safety, climate resilience, and cultural vitality indicators for people of color living and working near transit. So for the Garfield Green Line South Station, we are working with community groups and the Regional Transportation Authority to update and build upon their community work plan. And we have the specific goal of really continuing the process of turning that station into a community asset. And the project seeks to understand the impact that decades of disinvestment have had and work to change the narrative around a community with strong positive amenities And our team is looking to emphasize collaborative, community-led solutions to neighborhood displacement and inequities. And we've started out this project with a deep dive into the history of the area, and I'm going to take you down my rabbit hole today using a somewhat relic of a program, Prezi, to show you this map of prominent trade routes from 1804 in the Chicago region. It was a low-lying, swampy area, and the trade routes fell on ridge lines that had been left by glaciers from 11,000 years ago. And these routes were used by several tribes in the area, including Potawatomi, Peoria, Miami, Kickapoo, and Sioux. The Garfield Green Line Station falls along the Vincennes Trail, which was named after a French trader, and it still exists in parts of the area as Vincennes Avenue. As we were looking into doing the research, we found that the population data of the area, so starting in 1930, we have actual data for the community area of Washington Park through 2017. And prior to that, we are using data that follows the trend line of the population in Chicago. And let's see, so this graphic that we made, we borrowed the idea of looking at policies and events that had either harmful or helpful impacts on the community. So, and this is from the group United for a Fair Economy. They have a boosts and blocks timeline. So things shown with a pink color are things that were harmful to the community, and things that have green were helpful. And this is an evolving document that we've been working on. So we believe that it will continue to change and look differently. But I just wanted to take you through it today. So if we are to start back in 1860, that's when we had large numbers of Irish and Germans coming to the area to work in the meatpacking and railroad industries. We had the Great Fire of 1871, after which many people, both rich and poor alike, were moving out of the central city, and the South Side really started to expand. As the area really developed around train lines, the railroad industry had a huge impact on Chicago. This is showing what was the Green Line South. So the blue line has what was the first section of rail opened by the South Side Rapid Transit Company in 1892. And then what is shown in green is the extension that still exists today. And the gray lines are lines that have been cut out of service. And the stations shown with an X were also taken out of service. So I think between 1905 and 1908, this was really booming. We had 4 branches added. And but as you can see, much of that has been lost. And I think that really plays into the story of disinvestment in the area. So one important aspect of the history is coming with the start of World War I, and industries in the North were facing significant labor shortages. European immigration was restricted, and recruiters went looking to the South, encouraging African Americans to move north, where you could find higher wages. And between 1914 and 1919, approximately 1 million Black people moved north in what was known as the first wave of the Great Migration. In Chicago, the Black population grew by 148%. So following the end of World War I, GIs were coming home to a landscape that was different than that which they had left. There were fewer jobs available, and racial tensions were really high. The existence of racially restrictive covenants, the presence of sundown towns in the area, and physical violence by white neighbors really limited where Black people could live in Chicago. And much of the available housing was overpriced and overcrowded. So you had multiple families living in a space that was intended for only a single family. And it wasn't that people couldn't afford it, it was that they were not allowed to live in other places. They were often paying higher rents in these terrible conditions. So In 1919, this really culminated when a young Black boy in Chicago was drowned for swimming in the white area of the beach. And police refused to arrest the white man who had thrown the rocks and was identified as causing the drowning. And violence erupted. You had white gangs coming into Black neighborhoods and attacking people, and you had Black gangs forming in response to defend themselves, and 16 days of violence became known as the Red Summer. And the Chicago Commission on Race Relations in 1922 looked into the causes of the uprisings and found that it was a result of several key issues, primarily competition for jobs, inadequate housing options for Black people, and inconsistent and discriminatory law enforcement and pervasive racial discrimination. So the population was still increasing, and our transit ridership peaked in 1926, but it started falling after that point. And city leaders were looking for ways to adapt the city to the private automobile. And also in 1926, racially restrictive covenants were upheld by the Supreme Court. And in the decade that followed, we had a lot of increased car usage. It was cheap to get a car, and that led to high levels of congestion on city and suburban streets. In 1940, I'm sure you've heard a lot about the red line maps, but this was when the first red line map of Chicago was created. And it was identifying areas by their racial composition to assess their risk for, or their potential risk for mortgages. And this made it extremely difficult for Black people and anyone living in an integrated neighborhood to secure loans or generate any form of wealth from their home ownership. It also had the effect of blocking commercial enterprises from getting loans. And I think this plays into why we see so many deserts today, of whether it's a pharmacy desert or a food desert. And as I said, the population was still growing, and so this created even more housing challenges in the area. So there were groups of people looking for solutions, and there were developers and real estate leaders and professionals from the Metropolitan Planning and Housing Council, which we know of as MPC today. And they saw an opportunity to address this so-called blight, which was really the result of racially restrictive housing policies. And their idea was to clear the slums and open up areas for new development. So they presented the Chicago's mayor with a housing plan. They lobbied at the state level, and urban renewal was born. And as I said, the idea was to address overcrowding, but they had several problems in how they went about it. And they didn't end up creating as many housing units as they tore down. And the white opposition to integration meant that most of the public housing went into Black neighborhoods. And because the previously successful form of low-rise housing developments was a little more expensive, they transitioned to doing enormous high-rise towers. And at the same time, our predecessor agency, CATS, was helping to fund the highways that were laid through these neighborhoods that they were clearing. And for Washington Park, that was the Dan Ryan that really cemented segregation on the south side. Meanwhile, as our population was peaking in the area, service on 3 branches of the Green Line South were ended and the lines were closed. The towers that were built in Washington Park were the Robert Taylor homes. And when they opened, they housed 27,000 people, and they had to turn people away because there was so much demand. So they instead focused on prioritizing households with children. So the young population in the area exploded. And even though CPS had been warned about this coming population increase, they did not provide adequate resources to accommodate this increase in school children. And rather than allow students to enroll in white schools that had vacancy, the district officials created double shifts where Black students attended school for only part of the day, and then they traded off with a second group. And these clearly inferior, overcrowded, and underfunded schools in the Black community were really the beginning of the civil rights movement in Chicago, and they added to the growing frustrations in the early 60s for basic civil rights. In 1967, Dr. King gave a speech in Chicago in March, and he condemned the Vietnam War, which really aligned the anti-war movement with the civil rights movement. And so you had your anti-war hippies celebrating the summer of love at the same time that the poor housing conditions, continued abusive policing, and institutionalized unemployment in the Black community really culminated in uprisings and riots across the United States. It wasn't just in Chicago. In the summer of 1967, which was known as the Long Hot Summer. Again, we had another commission looking to identify the causes of the rioting. So this time it was the Kerner Commission, and I found that persistent societal inequities were to blame. And specifically, they said that white racism was to blame, that white institutions created the ghettos and maintained them. And interestingly, when the researchers were trying to identify who was most likely to participate in the riots, they came to two conclusions. First, they said they shouldn't call it rioting because to use that word would indicate that the actions were irrational, but these were perfectly rational responses to inhumane living conditions. And they also said that what made a person most likely to participate in an uprising was that they were either the victim of or a witness to police brutality. So when I read about that and put that alongside what we're hearing in the news today, it really was impressionable, as we know that history tends to repeat itself. So the following year, Dr. King was assassinated. We had the Civil Rights Act of 1968, and Chicago held its infamous Democratic National Convention. So after that, new president, we had the war on drugs that emerged, and this was in part to malign both the anti-war hippies and the poor Black and brown city dwellers. And by targeting the gang leaders, in the 1970s, they had the result of breaking up the large gangs and creating many smaller factions, which significantly increased the violence in the area. So this layering of so many harmful and oppressive policies and poor living conditions meant that those who could leave did. And this is really how disinvestment leads to displacement. So you can see a dramatic drop in population in the 70s. Well, actually, it really started in the 50s. We only had that boost in the 60s because of the housing projects. In the 90s, we saw CTA made even more cuts to Green Line service and station. I found reports with Jackie in the news being unhappy about that. And we had federal support for transit that dried up. It went from 41.5 million in 91 to nothing in 1998. But in the last decade, we have, thanks to passionate advocates and community leaders, we have seen a number of positive investments in the area, including some artist lofts, a new performing arts center. The park was added to the National Register of Historic Places. The station itself was designated with landmark status. And there have been new Clio, beautiful apartments, and we've even had some new sidewalks put in. So it's important for us as we are working with the community to recognize all that has happened to the community up to this point, and in order to understand the current conditions. So, and to understand that there may be skepticism of government agencies and outsiders coming in. And also the importance of listening to the community voices who really know best what they need to thrive. So this is our basic timeline of the project. Being in a pandemic has pushed back much of our public engagement efforts, and we're still trying to work out how we can safely engage community members during these times, especially when we are working with a community that has been identified as not having widespread broadband access. So that is a challenge that I welcome any discussion topics that you might have or ideas for that. And overall, we think that The project will take about 24 months, but obviously that's going to depend on how well we can reach people and engage them, because we can't really do the plan justice without that. So I hope you enjoyed my little dive into history, and I welcome any comments or questions.
So this is Sherry. First, I'll start. Thank you so much. That was wonderful. And I'm glad it's recorded so I could go back and really delve into that. Is your map available?
We haven't published it online yet. As I mentioned, it's still in draft mode, but we will put it on our website as soon as we feel like it's at a slightly better position.
And are these type of delving into the history and looking at that for going on with the other LSTOPs in the project, or is this the only because it was an LTA related work?
This is specific to the Garfield station, but so many of these issues impacted other stations that I think we will be doing an elevated project for the California Pink Line station, and I think we'll find some similar, some different issues for that one, but we hope to also do a deep dive in history for that one as well.
Great, thank you. Please, if anybody has any questions or comments, unmute yourself. I mean, again, go ahead.
I'll just jump in while if people are thinking or just reflecting that I'm also assisting Lindsay on this project as a team member, and I've really enjoyed being part of this process. I really think the historical lens is an important one, and it's been, I think, a great addition. So I really was excited to see Lindsay lay this all out, as I engaged with this when it was still in the draft form.
Thank you, Timmy, and thank you for your work. And I'm sorry I didn't mention our team members, but we have a great team compiled.
So the goal is that, because I looked at it, there was to work with the community, obviously do the whole history and understanding the environment there, and then now looking to see how to what needs to be in place to develop that area around the Green Line, the Garfield stop Green Line.
Yes, to really capitalize on the transit station as the community asset, and see what the neighborhood wants to make it better for the people who are living there. I wish Jackie weren't having volume issues. I can't hear what she has to say.
Yes. No,
I do have one question. This is Enrique Salgado. And it was only because you mentioned the Kerner Commission plan, right? So that brought to me, I'm actually reading the 50-year anniversary that Alan Curtis and Fred, oh my God, I forgot the actual senator, the last surviving member of that commission. They updated that, right, and did a look back and forward, and it'd be curious to actually bring perhaps some of the suggestions, right, and then have maybe the community react to them. I think it would just be it would just be very curious, right, to look at a point in time 50 years ago, 50 years today, as it relates to policy and how the community, or even how the community's plan aligns with or needs, right, or wants aligns with what policy recommendations are, given that this is CMAP.
I think that's a great idea, and it was disheartening to read on all the various commissions how and none of their recommendations were implemented.
Yeah, you'll find that book real interesting if you do read it, because they actually do point to which ones were, or what pieces were, and then what wasn't, which the majority wasn't. So I'd just be curious.
Can you put the name of that book into the chat?
Sure. Let me see if I can find it. Oh, actually, I have the book. I'll just go get it. On the kitchen.
Well, yes, because it is, again, with all the, Jackie may be on, with all the work that has happened in the past and then not having them implemented and possibly ending up in worse situations. It's sort of key of like, how will we make sure that the recommendations and the progress is going to happen now?
Mhm.
And Jackie, we saw you unmuted there for a second, Jackie Grimshaw, but we still
Didn't
can't. Darn it. We'll get your. And then Enrique, did you put something? We see a thumbs up, but I don't see
Oh, I
anything.
said I heard her. I heard her for a split second. Yes, there you go. Speak. Oh, no.
Darn it.
No.
Well, thank you so
But
much.
what I was going to say was, what I was going to ask, the last thing was, and I didn't hear anything about like Invest Southwest, the city's efforts and initiatives in regards to how it possibly plays into this. That I think is something that needs to be taken into account and called out, either in its alignment or not, also with the community's discussion that's happening.
Yep, that's a great idea. I will add that both to our timeline and then moving forward, because it is a relatively new, I guess, program, and the Elevated Group is part of the Committee on Equitable Transit-Oriented Development, and there are representatives. It's being led by the city, and they have talked about the Invest Southwest program. So that is an excellent point.
Great. So if no one has any other questions, I think we want to move to our next agenda item about the grade crossings project update. Who's presenting on that? So much Lindsay and Timmy and the rest of the team working on that. It was really great.
So I'm going to be presenting on this, and there should be a video to start off. Okay, so we went out and collected some information about trains, and I want you to watch where these arrows are pointing. We found in many instances that the crossings that we were studying had trains that were blocking the crossings for often more than 10 minutes. This particular train was here for more than an hour. So this train got here at about a little after 12:50. It had stopped by about 12:55. So we see people coming and not being able to cross legally, but some actually risking their lives and limbs to cross through the train as the train just sat there. People have the right to travel. They need to get from work to school, or from home to school. They need to get from home to work. People shouldn't have to take risks like this to get where they need to go. We have 1,600 plus crossings in the region, and this happens every day at some of these crossings. This is just one of the issues that we need to face as we're and deal with as we're working through this grade crossing study and the feasibility stage. Next slide, please. So we had collected that video just as data collection, and again, we were quite shocked when we saw what we saw there. I'm going to talk about the overall issues that we see. go over our research and analysis that we've conducted, the prioritization process that we've created for the grade crossings, and then finally the studies that we're initiating to actually come up with solutions, working with communities to determine the next steps. So next slide. Chicago is, in the Chicago region, is a freight hub. We have more than 1,000 trains, more than 1,200 trains per day using the region. Next slide. There are 1,600 plus highway rail grade crossings. Again, more than 1,200 trains in the 7-county region. Next slide. We have identified goals. We collect data on delay at these crossings. These are motorist delays, and we have a goal to reduce the daily hours of delay to about 6,000 from the current level of about 7,500. And when we first started measuring this, it was more than 10,000 hours a day. So the delay is going down, although it's going down more slowly than it had been when we first started measuring it. Next slide. But it's not just average delay like what we saw in those measurements. At some crossings, we see crossings blocked for long periods during the day. So we observe blockages longer than 60 minutes. At the crossings that you see listed here, these are in the range of more than one blockage per day, greater than 10 minutes. We only have this information for crossings on the former Elgin, Joliet, and Eastern, which was purchased by the Canadian National Railroad. So we don't have comprehensive regional information like you see here. But again, we know that it's a big issue in our region, and we know that it affects communities. We know that it affects our residents. There isn't a policy lever to address these long gate blockage events, but with the new transportation bill, there is consideration in Congress, basically for the first time, to address this issue legislatively. Next slide. So, and we've been measuring motorist delay. That's something that we have the ability to measure, but we also know, and again with this video, we've seen that the grade crossings are an issue for pedestrians. They are an issue for bicyclists, particularly in areas with transit service. This is a big issue. So next slide. So we've done some research and analysis on this issue. So next slide. We have developed a revised model that we've collected some information to kind of fill out for estimating delay. Next. And the sites where we collected information are indicated in orange here. So sites throughout the region, but mostly concentrated in areas where we know the issue is greatest, on the south and southwest sides in particular. Next. And this is an example of some of the information that we collected for one crossing. This happens to be in West Chicago, and we see that the purple lines indicate the dark purple indicates the amount of gate downtime for freight trains, And then the light purple indicates the amount of time that it takes for the queue to clear. And then the dark green indicates the time that it takes a commuter rail the gate down time for the commuter rail. And then the light green indicates the queue clearance time for the commuter rail. So we see that for the freight trains, for example, the crossing delay can be up to 7 or 8 minutes. Region-wide, we found that the gate down and the queue clearance time totaled about 8 minutes. Again, that's on average for the average train. So a lot of people having to wait a long time for these trains. Next. So for these crossings, we found that the old method compared to the new method of estimating delay was 160% or an increase of 160% over the prior estimates. So our old, kind of the numbers that we were using before of how much delay that people were facing was a substantial underestimate of the actual problem in the field. Next. So as we were going through this, we knew that we needed to come up with a priority list. And what I want to talk about now is how we did that. Next. We looked at the data that we had available for all 1,600 plus crossings, using our old method of delay. We will update this with a new method, but the estimate of crossing delay, crash risk, truck exposures. Trucks tend to have a hard time at grade crossings and often get stuck. We have transit impacts, and that numeric analysis then was then used to kind of whittle the list down into 150 crossings that we took detailed looks at, including development impacts and community impacts, and then also considered whether the project was already looked at and the community had no support, or whether the project was already in engineering. Basically, the status of prior reviews of the project. Next slide. So this information we shopped around to our stakeholders, including the counties and some affected municipalities. The result was a prioritized list of 47 either locations, individual crossings, or groups of crossings that we are recommending continued implementation for or review. So next slide. So again, some of those prioritized crossings are in an engineering process, but some really haven't been looked at all. And so we are engaging, or they haven't been reviewed in decades. So we are engaging in a particular type of feasibility study to kind of develop a pipeline of projects to address some of these grade separation issues. Next slide. So when we look at crossings and the potential for improvement, there are a number of things that you can do. One thing that we can do is to improve railroad performance. So if the trains are moving and they're not waiting for each other within the Chicago terminal, then the community nearby doesn't have to wait for the train. So so the I mean, one of the major projects in CREATE, the 75th corridor is, kind of implementing this idea. They're eliminating a rail bottleneck. By eliminating the rail bottleneck, the crossings up and down the line will be improved throughout the region. So that's one approach. The other approach is to have various highway improvements, maybe rerouting traffic using ITS, intelligent transportation systems, dynamic signs, rerouting traffic to crossings that are not blocked. A third solution to the problems we see might be focused on simply pedestrian and bicycle improvements that may be lower cost than some of the other improvements, but really address some of the key community needs that aren't met. Sometimes we have crossings where motorists can drive a mile to get around a block crossing, and we saw this at the video that we showed at the beginning. The nearest crossing was a couple miles away, so people can drive that distance. If you're a pedestrian or bicyclist, that's not feasible. It'll take an hour to do that detour. So some of the communities that we've talked to really want us to focus on some of the pedestrian crossings. Some crossings are going to need full grade separations, and these cost tens of millions of dollars, but in some cases they're really necessary. So next slide, please. These are some of the crossings that have been constructed over the past 10, 15 years or so. The US 30 in Linwood over the what was the former Elgin Joliet and Eastern. One example, Rollins Gateway in Round Lake Beach is another. Next. The 130th and Torrance project within the city of Chicago is another example. This actually had two, it was an intersection of two regional arterials, and the grade separation project allowed both of the roads to be separated. Next slide. The process that we're using for these studies is called planning and environmental linkages. So we are having the first few steps of the engineering process be integrated into our planning work. So we engage in a lot of public engagement. We develop what's called a purpose and need using that public engagement as well as technical information, identify alternatives, use the purpose and need and the public feedback to screen the alternatives as well as cost information, and then basically have a series of recommended alternatives and the purpose and need that can be brought forward to the engineering process to again create that pipeline of projects that we talked about at the beginning to move forward. So next slide. Here is kind of a map of our first Pell study using this process. So Laraway Road in Preston Heights, south of Joliet. So it's a at-grade railroad crossing, high-speed rail corridor with 75% truck traffic, a major safety issue. Next slide. And this is an example of what the engineers working on our project have devised for one of the four alternatives that we're looking at. So in this case, we had some utility issues that we identified at the site. So the project is quite expensive, and again needs a lot of earthwork and so forth. But again, there's major amount of delay here, and this project will address that. So next. that is the end of my presentation. Again, kind of key things is, that we talked about are the issues both for pedestrians and motorists, the research and analysis that we've completed, and then the planning and environmental linkages study that we're engaging in to address prioritized projects to move forward into the transportation programming process. And I'm happy to answer any questions. Also, I want to note one more thing. So we have that prioritization process that we've identified those 47 crossings. We intend that to be a living document. So if folks have comments on those prioritized crossings, if there are big issues and locations that we haven't identified, we're happy to look at any issues that are raised and kind of have an inclusive process to look at this. So thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Tom. That was very interesting. I have some questions, but let's go ahead. If anyone on the call, on the phone and on the webinar, you can go ahead if you have any questions. I guess my question was when so the engineers come up with some possible solutions for these areas. Do you engage, or how do you engage the community and the travelers in this area on sort of giving their feedback on some of the prioritized solutions?
Yeah, so when we initiated the project, we sent, the first thing is we sent letters to known stakeholders, and then also invited community members we could identify to participate in a survey that indicated things like what they saw at the intersection, the issues that they faced at the site, how they get around when the crossing is blocked, how much of a problem this is for them, and then we also asked them for potential solutions on their end that we should look at, and so forth, problems that they've identified and solutions. So some of it was actually kind of interesting because like some of the residents there said that they had been waiting 20 years to get this invitation to provide input. So it was kind of gratifying to see that yes, they saw that the problem was there and that they really wanted to tell their story. And a lot of them did tell stories about what they did. And we saw some things through the survey that we didn't expect. So flooding in some of the neighbors' yards and the farms in the area and so forth just hadn't been on our radar, and the survey identified it, and we went back and looked at old pictures, and sure enough, we again saw some of the things that folks were talking about. So so it was really cool. For the future, for the alternatives that we develop, we have a second set of engagement activities that we're kind of thinking about and developing now. But we want to have a buy-in from the community and our federal stakeholders that what the approach that we're taking is okay, and then after that initial approach is okayed by the city and other stakeholders, then we go out for a public review and comment about how this will work out as a solution the issues they identified in the first step.
So I see, great, that's helpful. Jane, that you had put in the chat box the link for the public engagement site on the Laraway Road.
Yeah, and there is a public engagement plan that people can review in detail there, as well as the results of that first survey. So those are all posted on that engagement site online.
And there was also a question from Heather Armstrong. Well, what about Harlem in Berwyn?
So that is actually our next study to undertake. So we are in the midst of data collection at that site. We don't know what the final solution for that project will be based on feedback from the city of Berwyn. We're actually not going to look at just Harlem Avenue, but we're gonna go all the way east to East Avenue, include Oak Park Avenue, where Neal Hospital is, and East Avenue is where the police and fire service are. And then Oak Park Avenue is the hospital where my son had to wait for 2 freight trains to go by before he was born. And then and so that was anxiety causing. And then we'll also be looking at Harlem Avenue itself. Although there are development issues on all sides of this crossing, these crossings. So we need a very careful consultation with the communities to kind of proceed. We don't know if a full grade crossing is a solution here. Riverside in particular has indicated that their big concern is pedestrian issues, and Berwyn has indicated that police and fire access are their priorities. So we, and that's just the municipal point of view. We have to engage in a lot of conversation to figure out exactly what we need to do. It's a lot clearer on Laraway Road. We've already done our survey. We don't know what's going to happen in Berwyn Riverside.
Okay, great. Well, we'll stay tuned, and we're glad your son waited, and then for the freight trains. And I'm sure your wife glad he waited too. And also, I guess, just in the sense of that people were waiting for 20 years, and probably some even more to really have a comment that sort of a pressure, make sure that to get it right, and really consider the needs of the communities as this moves forward. So this is great. So please keep us posted on the progress of this. This is a great example of the work that CMAP does.
All right, thank you.
And next, Timmy or Enrique, if you wanted to lead this section.
Yes, so first, thanks again to our presenters, Lindsay Bailey and Tom Murtha, for those really great summaries of the work that they're doing. Now we wanted to shift to having more of a discussion among committee members, and spurring that by having a subset of members provide specific updates. And so we've asked Jackie Forbes and Hawaii Reed to provide some specific updates on how, in relation to the prompt on the screen, which I'll read for those on the phone, COVID-19 and increased focus on racial justice and police violence are impacting the work of regional stakeholders and partners. And we'll have the 2 members that I mentioned describe how their organizations are responding to these current events. So Jackie, if you could kick off this update, and again, I would encourage all committee members to chime in and respond if they see that there's intersections with the work that their organizations are doing as well.
All right, thank you. What I did, I wanted to look at this beyond just the Kane County Division of Transportation, but really what are we doing at Kane County as a whole? And I focus first on the COVID-19 issues that we've been going on. I reached out to my colleagues at the health department and found out, what are you working on right now? What is most important for you? And that is contact tracing is their focus right now. And just last week, they told me they launched a new application called Salesforce for case investigations, so that they have a new place where they can put all this information. It's more easily accessible for people to see internally what's how the contact tracing is going, all the information, symptom monitoring, contacts and escalating cases that identify that need additional resources. So it's this new application that they're working with now, and they're pretty excited to be doing this in addition to hiring new staff to help with contact tracing. They are also starting to look ahead to the fall and needing more PPE distribution. They had provided quite a bit of PPE for different organizations in the county. They will look at certain facilities that they're going to focus on. Long-term care facilities they've been hit hard, statewide, of course, and so we're focusing on our federally qualified health centers, hospitals, any of our first responders that we can help. Oral surgeons was another one that they identified as having a pretty good need for PPE distribution. And then where the Division of Transportation is kind of helping out with this, we are looking at kind of long-term, how are we going to distribute a vaccine once it's ready? And we've been talking about doing a drive-through vaccine as an option. In Kane County, we have the western part of our county is very rural, plenty of open space, and then the eastern part is much more urban. We have the cities of Elgin and Aurora, where we have more densely populated areas. So we were trying to think about two different places how we could handle that. So at the Division of Transportation, they've brought us on board to start thinking about places where in our rural areas would make sense, where we could possibly do sort of a drive-up vaccination point of dispensing or a pod site. So we've actually started that conversation here at KDOT, are now working with the health department to kind of prioritize and finalize our list of ideas so that we can go out and start working with these communities. Of course, as part of preparedness planning, we already have sites identified for doing dispensing, but we realized that this might be kind of a different situation than just pushing pills out to people. So we wanted to ensure that we had some additional locations identified so that we could reach our population out in the rural areas. So that's where they're at right now. Their focus is at the health department, and then at KDOT, we are just continuing business as usual. Our building is still closed to the public, and we're holding most of our meetings virtually. And as I mentioned, anytime we need to assist with the health department work or our Office of Emergency Management, we are participating in all those meetings right now. I did take a look at our cases and where we're at. There's, of course, with school starting, a lot of decisions being made by schools. And here in Kane County, as of yesterday, we have 9,330 cases. And interestingly, like other places in the state, we're seeing that the majority of those cases now are from our age range between 20 and 29 years old, where before we would see cases in our older population, and now we're seeing them. 20 to 29-year-olds have the most positive cases, and next is the 40 to 49-year-olds. So, and third is 30 to 39, so a little younger than we were seeing before. So we're keeping an eye on that, of course, working with all of the schools on their reopening plans, things like that. I want to also call out the city of Aurora because they are the second largest city in the state and how they're addressing this. They have their own dashboard on their website where they have their own data that they're presenting so that people can see that Aurora is unique and that it's located in 4 different counties. So they can break it out by their zip code and you can kind of see where their cases are. They also are seeing higher rates in that same age group that we are in Kane County overall. so something to keep our eye on. They also were affected by the protests in response to the George Floyd killing. There was some riots, unfortunately, that did result in damages to buildings downtown. I was actually out there on Friday, and it looks like a lot of places have been fixed up and it's looking pretty good down there, but they had immediate response to what's going on there and are working hard to support their businesses. As far as Kane County, we are a little behind some of the other counties when it comes to the CARES money that's being distributed. The county board members have a task force in place and are meeting regularly to determine how the funding is going to be distributed. So it hasn't been distributed yet, but they are talking about how they're going to include nonprofits, private business owners, local business owners into the funding distribution that's being used. There's going to be specific monies for our municipalities based on census numbers, and then also additional money for these other groups. So they're still working through that. I listened to part of the meeting that they had yesterday, and it sounds like they're getting pretty close so that we can get some relief to our communities who've had to respond to the pandemic so far. So that's kind of an update of what's going on here.
Yeah, thank you, Jackie. That was very comprehensive, and I think it's good to Kane County and both the more rural as well as more urbanized areas. I think that was a great summary for folks on the call. If anyone, I'll give folks a second if there was anything they wanted to respond to specifically that Jackie brought up. If not, just hold that thought and we can move on to Obai Reed to provide an update on what his work through Equiticity and his other organizations have been proceeding with.
Hello, everyone. Thank you, Timmy. Equiticity is not doing a lot around COVID right now. One is limited capacity. Other is it's not our expertise, and that's particularly an area that requires some expertise. However, there is sort of one element, or maybe two elements of our work that does in some ways connect to addressing COVID. We are partnering with Boxing Out Negativity. It's a youth-focused violence prevention program here in North Lawndale on a ride, a community bicycle ride on Saturday, August 15th. We're doing this ride because of the uptick in violence in North Lawndale, and we are making a calculated risk around a ride to decrease violence in this neighborhood and ensure that we're executing the ride in a way where we're able to keep people free from exposure to COVID at the event and even give them more awareness around COVID, when they leave the event. In that respect, we are working with the health systems in and around North Lawndale to coordinate our response to COVID within this ride or this event. So we've talked with Mount Sinai, St. Anthony, Cook County Health System, Lawndale Christian, Esperanza. We've been working with them, and we're also going to be working with the NLCCC and their COVID task force to put a strategy in place to help keep people safe. We are tentatively exploring the potential of bringing a health system to the ride or to the event. There'll be an expo prior to the actual ride. We're tentatively exploring bringing a health system to the event to do on-site testing. It's not a done deal. As you likely imagine, we have some concerns about what it means to bring people into an event who are coming expressly for the purpose of getting tested. And that poses all types of challenges. So we're still sort of working through those logistics and making a decision, is this the right thing to do? We like the potential of so many people being at the event anyway, and using that as an opportunity to just really encourage people to go get tested, whether you have symptoms or not. So that's for the most part our involvement in COVID, is that one event and what we're doing to keep people safe and the potential of having on-site testing. With regards to police violence, of course, that's something that we are actively involved in, mostly on a research side, and I'll share what we're doing there. So we recently completed our Mobility Justice in Chicago research in partnership with Kate Lowe at UIC and Cuppa, Audrey Winnick at Metropolitan Planning Council, Jesus Barajas. He was at University of Illinois at Champaign. He's now at University of California at Davis. A number of community-based organizations and a number of workforce centers here in the region. That research did qualitative focus groups, which I'll talk about, and then we did an analysis of transportation equity performance measures used by NPOs across the country, and we made recommendations on how to make those performance measures more impactful. So what's related to our work on police violence is the results of our qualitative focus groups. We did focus groups attached to community-based organizations, and we did focus groups attached to workforce centers. We did two types of focus groups at the workforce centers. We did one type with clients or customers who are coming to the workforce centers seeking job counseling, job placement services. And we did another type of focus groups with the staff or job coaches who work at the workforce centers who are servicing the clients coming in for assistance. And then we did the focus groups with, and that was those focus groups attached to the workforce centers was all employment-based. That focus group was focused on employment-based questions, right? Like what's interfering with you getting a job, what's interfering with you keeping a job within the context of transportation. And then we did a separate type of focus groups with community-based organizations, and that was not limited to employment. It was all socioeconomic areas of one's life and how transportation fits into those areas. And what came out of all of those focus groups across the board was concerns around violence. And what's important here is that we don't think about violence narrowly, nor do people in our neighborhoods. And by the way, this research was targeting Black, brown, low to moderate income people who live on the South and West Side. We largely focus this work on the South and Southwest side. We did some workforce center focus groups on the West Side, but a vast majority of our work was South and Southwest. What we found was that people are deeply concerned about violence. Of course, they're concerned about interpersonal or gun violence. They are also concerned about police violence, and they're also concerned about vehicular violence. The reason this is so important is because those concerns are so heightened that even when walking or biking for any other, in any other circumstances, a reasonable choice of transportation, they are not choosing it. Partly it's infrastructural. There's a lack of infrastructure in our neighborhoods and people don't feel safe walking and biking. Partly there's concerns around exposure to interpersonal violence or gun violence. And then people who are walking and biking are deeply concerned about being accosted by the police. We know this is true in Chicago. There's research that reflects this. ACLU has research on police, CPD racially profiling Black people. The TRIB did extensive research 3 years in a row on police targeting Black cyclists. Our own researchers, which I'll talk about next, has done significant research on bike stops and pedestrian stops by CPD, reflecting, egregious racial profiling. So what we're finding is that people are making choices around their mode of transportation reflected by their concerns around violence, including police violence. And what that means is that some are choosing to purchase a car. Low to moderate income people are choosing to purchase a car, even when it's not the most reasonable mode of transportation. And even when their income is so low that the percentage of their income going to transportation is, monstrous, they feel compelled to do so. So that's one element of our research that has uncovered what we've long known. Now we have the data and the research to back it up. The second part of our research is our work around racialized enforcement inequities. And some of you may have attended or may have learned about an event we did this past March, on March 9th, when 3 of our research partners came together to present their findings around racialized enforcement inequities. It included Jesus Barajas, who shared his findings on pedestrian stops and cycling stops by CPD. It also included ACLU. My partner over there is Karen Shelley. I believe her title is Director of Advocacy. ACLU is a party to at least one consent decree with CPD and has access to a significant portion of that data. I believe they were looking at transit stops and vehicular stops, and they likely have access to all stops at CPD. So that's related to police enforcement. And then we have a researcher, Stacy Sutton at UIC, who presented her findings on automated enforcement. And I won't go into a lot of detail about automated enforcement. What I will say is that we are hearing locally here in Chicago, the mayor talked about it some months ago, and other cities and other municipalities talk about turning to automated enforcement to address concerns that Black and brown people have with a police enforcement strategy. Well, we found there's ample egregious racial inequities in automated enforcement. So we should be careful that we're not simply shifting one punitive approach to another when addressing police violence. As it stands right now, automated enforcement is not equitable, and it is Black and brown people are bearing the brunt of that system. With regards to inequities in police stops, we found across the board clear, egregious racial profiling, racialized inequities in how CPD is executing their enforcement strategies. And we even recall when we were doing a lot of advocacy around this, the community liaison, I don't know his formal position. I know him, I know the gentleman, he's I don't know, head of community relations for CPD. He came out publicly and said that CPD is targeting Black cyclists. He said it publicly, it's on video, he was on WTTW. CPD is targeting Black cyclists to reduce crime in predominantly Black neighborhoods. Under any other circumstance, that's racial profiling. That's what that is. And why they're able to get away with it and believe that that's going to be allowable is unsure to me. So in terms of next steps with both the focus groups, identifying concerns around violence as a major factor in how people choose to move around our city, and the racialized enforcement inequities work to have the quantitative data to show us the clear racialized inequities that's happening in enforcement. We are executing a strategy that's multifold, and that'll be going on over the next several months. First, we'll package our research. So 3 of the 4 research reports from the Mobility Justice in Chicago qualitative focus groups, they're available right now. Anybody who wants those, I'm happy to send you. The final report will be available tomorrow. So by tomorrow, all 4 reports will be available. I'm happy to share that with anybody who's interested. We've done 2 events. One was about our focus groups, our workforce focus groups, and our performance measures work. We did the event back on March 9th. We want to do another event. This one focused on community. We're still wrestling with what that looks like, given we're in the age of COVID. We don't believe a webinar is all that effective to reach Black and brown people at the neighborhood level. However, it may be our only option right now. So we're exploring that potential. Over the next few weeks, we'll go on a media blitz to get our research in the hands of media and generate some press and attention. We will be meeting with policymakers, elected officials. We hope to meet with CMAP staff. We hope to meet with agencies, DOT, RTA, CTA, to share this research with those policymakers and budget holders, and again, also including elected officials. In terms of the racialized enforcement inequities work, we are, there's two things that's coming next with that. One is our researchers are going to develop policy recommendations to remove racialized enforcement inequities as CPD. And then Equiticity, in partnership with our researchers, is developing a policy brief. So it'll be a package of a policy brief and policy recommendations. And then we'll want to execute the same strategy in terms of getting that information to the community, getting that information to policymakers and elected officials. And then I'll also add that I, along with Ms. Jackie Grimshaw and Linda Lopez, we are the 3 co-chairs of the Transportation Equity Network. And that group recently received funding from the Chicago Community Trust to execute some work. Part of it is a response to COVID. And we are also asking those members, the member organizations of that coalition, to provide us feedback on our policy recommendations around racialized enforcement inequities. So I'll stop there. I think I talked way too long. There's a couple other things I could tell you about. However, I feel like that's enough, and I'm happy to answer any questions or have some discussion about this stuff.
Yes, thank you, Abai. That's been that was a very comprehensive report out, and I think I'm speaking for everyone that we appreciated specificity, and I'm certain that other folks at the agency will be looking forward to engaging further in some of the report outs that you highlighted were coming down the road. So at this point, I wanted to reopen it to the floor to other committee members if to chime in on their experiences based off of what Obai and Jackie have mentioned in these last few minutes. It would just be great to be able to try to facilitate a little bit of an exchange of conversation.
Hello, this is Ricky, Enrique Salgado. The one wonderful presentation. So I just there's so much that we could just dive into just on all of that. But it does actually bring to light a question of whether or not, and I can't recall when we actually had the presentation of the health recommendations for CMAP, is the issue of trauma and post-traumatic stress within communities of color had been taken into account. I think that would be an interesting correlation to look at as it relates to policy, right? And throw in also one of the other presentations that was done around the issue of demographic changes and walkability that was done several months back. I think if you overlay that with everything that Obai just talked about, you really, it really starts to paint an interesting picture, not only of the current status and usage of transportation and transportation modes, but also some of the barriers, right, in creating adaptation for specific populations. Yeah, I'll just stop there. But I think that would be a real interesting thing to look at from a policy perspective.
I totally agree. Ricky, who are you with?
I officially work for Centene, which is a managed care organization, but I officially started on the CMAP committee just as a community resident.
Okay.
I live and work in Humboldt Park, been here my whole life, and been doing planning and development for 20 years.
Well, as a separate note, I would love to just talk with you offline. I think you bring up a powerful point, and I would love to think about how we integrate that in some of the next levels of research that we want to execute. So I know that there's trauma around Black and brown people in terms of mobility, from being accosted by the police to, becoming victims of violence, or, being in close proximity to it. And that trauma is imprinted on us. And that is causing us to make these decisions around executing our human right to mobility. And one of the things that we talk about all the time is how important it is to socialize people around mobility. Like in our neighborhoods, we need a community to get on a bike and ride together and feel safe. Like that's a different experience than, white, middle to upper income, North Side residents who commuting to work alone. We have to socialize people around mobility, rather it be walking or biking. Mm-hmm. And I think that's one of the ways we use mobility to address the trauma that we've experienced. I won't go into a lot of detail on this. I could tell you that there's some early work being done to bring a neighborhood mobility hub to Chicago and really marry hardware, which is the devices, the infrastructure, with software, which is the socialization, the community rides, the walking tours, the advocacy work, to begin to break down some of the trauma that people are experiencing around mobility.
So this is Sherry. Thank you, Obai and Ricky and Jackie, for sharing that information. Just talking about all this transportation stuff, and I know I talked with Enrique and Timmy earlier about if there's any connections between or among the other committees of CMAP. So maybe there might be some ways that we can connect with the transportation committee and engage in some of these conversations. Just a thought for as we move along. So I just wanted to be, where we are with time. We only have 3 more minutes left. Again, thank you so much for the presentations and the discussions. It was really helpful, and it was a great way of getting information. I see we're open for public comment. Timmy or Enrique, did you have any emails that came through?
No, we did not receive any public comments via email.
Okay. Is there any public comments right now?
Yes, Garland Armstrong. Just want to piggyback on what Lindsay said before, but I want to make sure that we could make sure that the hard of hearing people can also be involved in it too, from all walks of life in the disability community, because sometimes the visually impaired doesn't understand it too, and the hard of hearing too doesn't understand. So we need to target those so that they can get involved in it too, and also give them all the resources that they need, so that they'll know what is happening right now in real life. Because I think the hard of hearing and the visually impaired sometimes are usually disconnected, but we need to get them in to see the reality of it.
Great. Thank you so much for your comment. And I'm sure CMAP will take that in advisement, and all of our work, all of our organizations need to make sure we focus on all populations there. Is there, I could think that other than that, I think we're good. Just to remind, we have our next meeting, oops, where did I put that? Is that in October? Where did that go? Mine
Yes,
disappeared.
the next meeting is October 6th at 10 a.m. again. And Chair, if we could just have a few members came in after we did the roll call at the beginning. So if anyone on the phone or joined in could just announce themselves now at the end of the meeting so that we can make sure to include your names in the minutes.
Hi, it's Kendra Freeman. I joined late.
Hi, Kendra. And Obayi, we know that you're here with your presentation. And Ricky, was there anyone else that joined? Okay, it sounds like that's it. Just to remind people, there are several links. Thank you for CMAP staff for attaching some of the links to the reports and other work going on in the chat, so people have that. So thank you so much. I think that's it. Timmy, I'll ask you. There we go. Adjourn. I'm at the right time. So thank you so much for all of this. Again, I will say I learn a lot, and it's exciting to hear all the development CMAP's doing internally and externally, and hear about all of our organization's work as we go through. So thank you for sharing, and we will see you in October.
Thank you, everyone.